How's your heart today? Some of the most important things in our lives were never said in dramatic places. They stayed in kitchens, in dining rooms, in the space between pass the rice and how was your day? Tonight is for the truths that sat quietly at the table with us, while plates clinked, water glasses sweated, and everyone kept choosing the safer conversation. These letters are about ordinary dinners, familiar people, and the words that arrived too slowly to be spoken on time. Maybe one of them will sound a little like home. I never told you that I was relieved every time dinner lasted longer than usual. I had just moved back home, and I made it sound temporary, in a tone that was supposed to protect my dignity. I told everyone at work that it was practical. I told friends it would help me save money. I told myself it was only for a few months until I figured things out. All of that was true, but none of it was the real reason my chest loosened a little every evening when I heard plates being taken down from the cabinet. The real reason was that I was tired in a way I did not know how to explain yet. Not broken. Not falling apart in some dramatic, movie-worthy sense. Just quietly worn down. Work had become one long, flat stretch of pressure. I was sleeping badly, answering messages too quickly, apologizing too often, and carrying the private shame of feeling less capable than I had looked from the outside. Moving back home felt like a step backward, and I hated how embarrassed that made me. So, at dinner, I performed normal. Mom asked if traffic was bad. Dad asked whether my manager still sent emails too late. My brother complained about the internet speed as if it were a national emergency. I answered what I could. I laughed in the right places. I reached for the soy sauce. I asked if there was more soup. If anyone had walked in from outside, they would have seen a perfectly ordinary family meal. What they wouldn't have seen was how much I needed those 40 minutes. Dinner became the only part of my day where I could stop pretending to be entirely self-sufficient. Nobody made me explain my whole inner life. Nobody asked for a clean summary of what was wrong. The table gave me something smaller and somehow more useful. A place, a routine. Rice in the pot. Steam on the windows. Someone reminding someone else to sit properly. The sound of water running in the sink before the food came out. It was structure without interrogation. I think that's why I stayed quiet. Not because I felt nothing, but because dinner was the one time my feelings did not have to perform in order to be held. There was one night in particular I still think about. It was raining hard enough to make the kitchen lights reflect in the glass like another room. I got home late, wet at the shoulders, already apologizing for the time as if lateness were a moral failure. Mom told me to wash up. Dad took my bag without making a big deal of it. My brother had already started eating and said, with his mouth full, that he'd saved me the last dumpling even though it was obvious he had almost eaten it himself. I sat down and, for a few minutes, nobody asked me anything serious. Dad commented on the rain. Mom asked if I wanted more broth. Someone complained about the price of fruit. It should have felt insignificant. Instead, I nearly cried into my rice. Not because anyone had said the perfect thing, because nobody was asking me to be impressive. At work, every conversation felt like a chance to prove I was managing. Even with friends, I had started editing myself. I would say, just tired, because it sounded adult and tidy. At dinner, I could be quiet, without becoming suspicious. I could reach for another spoonful of soup, and let the warmth do what language couldn't. A week later, Dad asked, very casually, "You sleeping better now?" I looked up so fast I almost laughed. I had not told him I wasn't sleeping well. I had not told anyone. He was looking at his plate when he asked, as if the question had wandered onto the table by accident. I said, "A little." He nodded and moved on. That small question followed me all night. It made something obvious that I had somehow missed. Families do not always need a full confession to know when one of their own is carrying too much. Sometimes they can hear it in the way you set your keys down. Sometimes they can see it in how long it takes you to answer a simple question. Sometimes they notice, because love is paying attention in the background. I wish I had told you all that I was not ungrateful for home. I know I acted impatient sometimes. I know I went to my room too early. I know I rolled my eyes when Mom asked if I had eaten lunch, as if lunch were the issue. But the truth was that I was deeply relieved to be somewhere I did not have to earn every day from scratch. I also wish I had said that moving back home did not make me feel like a failure for nearly as long as I thought it would. Once I stopped comparing my life to the version I had imagined, I saw what those dinners were giving me. Not dependency. Recovery. Not shame. Rhythm. The kind of ordinary care that doesn't solve your life but reminds your nervous system it doesn't have to stand guard through every meal. By the time I moved out again, I had become better at many things. Better at sleeping, better at saying no, better at letting other people see me before I turned my exhaustion into personality. But I never told you what those dinners did for me while I was there. I never said that sometimes I came downstairs not because I was hungry, but because I wanted to hear the familiar sounds of people who already knew me without an introduction. I never said thank you for asking ordinary questions instead of forcing dramatic conversations I wasn't ready for. I never said that home, in that season, sounded like plates touching the table and someone saying, "Sit, eat while it's hot." The sentence I carried and never spoke was this: I wasn't quiet at dinner because I had nothing to say. I was quiet because it was the only place I felt safe enough to stop performing. And sometimes that kind of silence is its own form of being cared for. Some truths stay at the table, because the table is where we are most gently held. The next letter is for a kind of silence that feels lonelier. The one that happens when someone you love is sitting right in front of you. I never told you that I started missing you before we actually ended. That feels like an unfair sentence, even now. You were not cruel. We were not one of those couples people whisper about afterward. There were no slammed doors, no impossible betrayals, no one dramatic moment I could point to and say, "There, that's when everything broke." If anything, the difficult part was how normal we looked. We still had dinner together most nights. That was the strange part. From the outside, we might have seemed fine. Two tired people in a small apartment, eating at a wooden table we bought secondhand on a Sunday after comparing prices like we were already building a life. We still asked each other whether there was enough rice. We still passed the salt. We still mentioned work, bills, a friend's message, what needed to be picked up from the store. The mechanics of togetherness remained. That may be why it took me so long to admit that something softer had gone missing. I started noticing it in tiny ways. A funny story would happen at work, and I would save it in my head, only to realize later that I no longer felt the same urge to tell you. I would sit across from you at dinner and know what your schedule looked like, what time your train was delayed, whether your boss was difficult that week, but not know what was sitting under your mood. You knew the outline of my days, but not always the emotional weather inside them. We had become informed about each other without being reached. I didn't know how to say that without sounding ungrateful, because you still did kind things. You fixed the loose handle on the kitchen drawer. You brought home the tea I liked without asking. You remembered which tomatoes I thought tasted better and which brand of dish soap I always bought. I did my part too. I packed leftovers. I washed your favorite mug by hand because I didn't trust the dishwasher with it. I left the hallway light on if you got home late. We were still caring for each other in practical ways, but the table had changed. Dinner used to be where we landed. It used to be the place where the outside day fell away and the real conversation started. Not always profound conversation. Sometimes just silly things, half-finished observations, a memory one of us suddenly remembered. There was room for rambling, room for bad jokes, room for silence that felt connected instead of careful. Then, little by little, the dinners became quieter in the wrong way. Not hostile, just efficient. We ate and updated each other. We discussed what needed doing. We shared information. Then one of us stood to wash up before the other had even finished the last few bites. If anyone had asked whether we were fighting, I would have said no and believed myself. That's the danger of gentle drifting. It doesn't announce itself loudly enough to force action. One night, we were eating noodles because neither of us had the energy for anything more ambitious. You were telling me about a coworker who kept scheduling meetings at the end of the day, and I was nodding in the right places, but my mind was elsewhere. Not because I didn't care, because I suddenly realized I was lonely with you right there. That was the moment. You reached across for the chili oil, and I handed it to you, and something inside me thought, we are still being so polite. I almost said it then. I almost said, I miss us. Not the old version, exactly. Not some idealized beginning. Just the version of us that still arrived at this table with energy to spare for each other. The version that could sit in sweatpants and say, "Can I tell you something stupid?" and know the answer would always be yes. The version that still used the table for more than maintenance. But I didn't say it. Partly because I was afraid of being unfair. Partly because I didn't know what I was asking for. And partly because once you name loneliness inside a functioning relationship, the room changes shape forever. I was scared that if I spoke, I would either be told I was imagining it, or worse, be told I wasn't. So I kept choosing smaller sentences. Long day? Did you eat enough? Can you pass the water? Sometimes I think relationships don't only end because love disappears. Sometimes they end because both people become too tired, too careful, or too late with the sentences that might have opened a window before the air got thin. When we finally did talk about it months later, neither of us was shocked enough. That's how I knew the silence had been real for longer than I wanted to admit. We spoke gently, we cried a little. We used phrases like, "I care about you," and "I don't think either of us meant for this to happen," which were both true and strangely unbearable. Because goodness wasn't the issue. Distance was. What I wish I had said sooner is this: I didn't need a perfect version of us back. I just needed us to stop treating dinner like a meeting between two capable roommates with shared responsibilities. I wanted to say I missed being emotionally hungry in your presence and knowing there would be something warm on the table besides food. I wanted to say that practical care matters, but it cannot fully replace being reached. I wanted to say that passing each other the salt is not the same as passing each other the truth. The sentence I never managed to speak in time was simple. The loneliest part was not losing you. It was sitting right across from you and feeling the distance arrive one quiet meal at a time. And maybe some endings begin there, not in anger, but in all the tenderness that slowly stopped being spoken aloud. Sometimes the saddest silence is not an empty chair. It's the one across from you that still looks occupied. The last letter is for the dinners we don't appreciate while we're in them, and then spend years trying to recreate in smaller, quieter ways. I never told you that I didn't know those dinners were teaching me how to live. When I was younger, I thought family dinner was mostly repetition. The same questions, the same jokes, the same argument about whether the fan was too strong or not strong enough. Someone always got up halfway through to get something they forgot. Someone always said they weren't hungry and then ate the most. I took it all for granted because routine is almost invisible when you're standing inside it. Now I live alone, and some nights I understand what those dinners were actually holding. Not just food. They held pacing, they held attention. They held the quiet agreement that evening would gather everyone back into one room, even if only for half an hour. No one explained it in big philosophical language. We just came to the table. Mom wiped it once more even if it was already clean. Dad adjusted a chair with that small scraping sound I still remember. Someone checked whether there was enough rice. Someone said, "Call your sister." Someone else said, "Start eating before it gets cold." At the time, it all felt too ordinary to matter. Now I know ordinary things matter the most because they are the ones that shape us without needing to be announced. A few months ago, after a long workday, I made dinner for myself and stood in the kitchen eating over the sink like a person who had quietly given up on the ceremony of being cared for. It wasn't sadness exactly, just fatigue. Then I caught myself moving the plate to the table, sitting down properly, pouring water into a glass instead of drinking from the bottle. It felt almost ridiculous, the effort of making one lonely meal look decent. And then I realized I was copying home. Not the menu, not the exact dishes. The respect. The old family dinners had taught me that eating was not just fuel. It was a pause, a return, a way of saying the day gets to end somewhere softer than it began. No one sat us down and taught that lesson. It entered through repetition, through someone caring whether the soup needed more salt, or whether there were enough clean bowls, or whether everyone had made it home. I think that's why those dinners still live in me. Even now, when I cook for myself after a hard day, I sometimes hear old table sounds in the silence. The spoon against a bowl. My father clearing his throat before asking a practical question. My mother reminding someone to eat the vegetables too. The tiny domestic orchestra of people who knew my face before I'd said a word all day. What I never told my family is that I understand them better now through absence. Back then, I thought the table was where nothing important happened. But the older I get, the more I see that many of the most important things in life happen without drama. Love repeated, presence repeated, care repeated until it becomes part of your nervous system. No wonder I miss it. No wonder I still try, in my own small apartment, to make dinner feel like an arrival instead of an interruption. Sometimes I plate the food even when no one will see it. Sometimes I wipe the table first. Sometimes I light the smaller lamp instead of the overhead one because the softer light feels more like evening should. And on the hardest nights, when the world feels efficient in all the wrong ways, I understand that what I am really craving is not a certain meal. It is the feeling of being gathered. I never told you that those old dinners are part of why I know how to soothe myself now. I never said that your ordinary habits became my emotional furniture. The way I put fruit in a bowl instead of leaving it in the bag. The way I ask people if they've eaten before I ask anything serious. The way I know that some conversations go better after soup, not before. I never said thank you for the kind of love that did not need to call itself special in order to become unforgettable. The truth I carry now is this: I thought those dinners were just part of growing up. I didn't know they were quietly teaching me what love feels like when it stays. And maybe that is why I keep returning to tables, hoping the right people, the right warmth, and the right honesty might still gather there. If these letters touch something familiar tonight, maybe it's because so much of our emotional lives was shaped in rooms that looked ordinary at the time. Dinner tables held more than meals. They held our tiredness, our restraint, our unspoken gratitude, our fear of burdening each other, and our hope that someone would notice anyway. Sometimes we didn't say the important thing then, but understanding it later still matters. If this stayed with you, stay with mind light, leave your own thoughts below, and be gentle with the words that took years to arrive. Some truths are late not because they are weak, but because they needed a quieter room to be heard.